the meeting. So that should be working. And then live on Facebook. Okay, so this Facebook live stream is just taking a minute here. As soon as I get this going, I'll start the meeting. Okay, go live. Okay, that Facebook should be running for anybody who's not in here. And then I got to make this smaller so I can see my other screen. All right. Share screen. Okay, can those of you who are unmuted hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. All right, great. So it's 5:31, so we're going to get started. Welcome everybody to the, this is a June 30th meeting of the Carmel Mountain Ranch Sabre Springs Community Council's Golf Course Subcommittee. I am Eric Edelman, and I'm sitting in for the subcommittee chairman, Rick Smith. So I'll be chairing tonight's meeting. Real quickly before we get started, as I usually do at the beginning of these things, just going to quickly go over meeting etiquette. So everybody's going to be muted until it's their turn to speak. The format for this meeting is not the same as a regular board meeting. The subcommittee determines the agenda based on what we need to go over. Public comment and questions will be heard at the end of the meeting. It's at the end of the agenda tonight, so the community will have a chance. However, just give us a chance to get through what we've got to get through, as it may answer a lot of the public's questions and concerns. And if not, you'll have the ability to make a comment at the end, and then limit those to 3 minutes or less, please, and then state if you're going to pool time with somebody else. Tonight's meeting is very likely to be longer than 90 minutes. And if we have any disruption from outside, which we never have, but I say this at the beginning of all these meetings, if there is some disruption from outside that can't be overcome, we'll just have to terminate the meeting. And we don't expect that, and certainly hope it doesn't happen. So tonight's agenda, real quickly, is going to be, and I emailed this out, but for those of you that didn't get the agenda on an email, we're going to do introduction of subcommittee members. The meeting is being recorded and also broadcast live on Facebook. And then we're going to do the approval of the agenda. Then the subcommittee is going to discuss the New Urban West design guidelines, and we're going to discuss some suggestions for changes to those. Number 5, I have on the agenda. We may skip depending on if we have time for that discussion or not. We were basically going to have a discussion about the best way to aggregate information and deliver it to the city of San Diego and New Urban West. However, again, we may just wind up skipping that one. And then Jonathan Frankel from New Urban West will be here to give us an update on the project progress and process with the city. And then we'll do public comment. So now we'll move to introduction of subcommittee members. And I've unmuted a lot of you, but if I haven't, I'll unmute you when I call your name. And now I got to find the list that I had. Here it is. Okay, Rick, is Rick Smith here? I don't see him. I'm looking for him in the participant list. I don't see Rick Smith. Okay. So at this point, we'll record that Rick Smith is not here, and if he shows up or I see him, we'll amend that. I'm Eric Edelman. I'm the chairperson for the Carmel Mountain Ranch Sabre Springs Community Council, and I am chairing tonight's subcommittee meeting. Rich Kregge, are you here?
Yes, I'm here. Rich Kregge, much hairier homeowner on Carmel Mountain Ranch than normal.
Looking good, Rich. Don't worry about it. Mark Clark. Is Mark here?
Yes,
Oh,
I am.
awesome.
Hi.
Awesome. Hi, Mark. Go ahead and introduce
Hi.
yourself.
Yes, Mark Clark, homeowner, Walden.
Thank you. Michelle Mullen.
Yep, Michelle Mullen, homeowner.
Thank you. John Schroeder.
Yes, John Schroeder, Carmel Mountain Ranch homeowner.
Thank you. And Kurt Carlson.
Yeah, hi, Kurt Carlson, homeowner.
Cool. All right. So at this point, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 out of 7, definitely a quorum for our meeting. So we can proceed. And what is that going to look like? Okay. First thing we need is a motion from a committee member to approve tonight's agenda.
Rich Kregge will make that motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
Kurt Carlson will second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? No. Good. Okay, so the agenda is approved. And so we'll move right on to subcommittee business. And the first thing that we're going to tackle tonight is we're going to have Kurt Carlson go through the new Urban West design guidelines. And Kurt can explain what those are. And I'm going to make you a meeting host, okay, Kurt, so you can share your screen. Is that what you intend to do?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing that screen and find Kurt in my participant list. We have 62 participants tonight. Welcome everyone, and thank you for being here. Where did Kurt go? Here he is. Okay, so the meeting will continue to record, and I'm making Kurt a host. Take it away, Kurt.
I hope I do this right. I'll find my screen. Can everybody see that?
Does anybody see his screen?
I cannot.
I cannot either.
Great. I don't know where everybody went.
Here comes something. Looks like we're viewing part of your screen. I see the Zoom, so probably just different tab.
You're not looking at the guidelines right now?
Yeah, here it goes. There you go.
Here, we got them now.
Yep.
I know mine, cheap laptop, I guess. All right, so I
I
have
gotta
a
say,
few
Kurt,
things to- What's that?
I was gonna say it looks like you're sharing your entire desktop, if that's okay,
Yeah, can you-
rather than just the PDF.
Are you seeing it right now?
Oh,
There
that's
you go.
better.
There you go.
Yeah, it's probably about 10 seconds sharing.
Okay.
So tonight, I have a little bit to just share before the guidelines, and I want to kind of go through that. If I get to the end of that and I can go through the guidelines and the red lines part of it. And tonight I'm really presenting this for discussion and consideration. It's a non-exhaustive list of concerns and objections, along with our golf course committee's specific proposals to remedy some of our concerns and objections to the developer for their consideration and response. The golf course subcommittee has not met since February 25th, 2020. For about 4 months ago, it's been difficult to adjust to the new norm of communication based on social distancing policies due to the COVID-19 virus. This new norm since March 19th quarantine has involved learning new forms of communicating, which I gave you an example of that right now, such as the new computer apps and formats. Go to Microsoft, Zoom, Google, WebEx, creates difficulty to physically accessing plans. In addition, we have quarantine fears that cause people to stay home. It's created breaks in communication and standards of traditional project reviewing. It's made it even more difficult on our community trying to understand the developer's plans and complex terminologies and meanings when you're not really used to reading these types of things. The purpose of our committee is to research and develop information, discuss, and give our honest opinions regarding this proposed development and pass it on for consideration by our group or to our community planning group for a vote. Good or bad, the vote and supporting information will then be shared with the City of San Diego Planning Commission and the City Council. We're hopeful they are listening and take seriously as to what we as a community have to say. The city's Development Service Project Manager provided 2 documents to the Community Council for review in mid-April. These documents are the 59-sheet complete set of plans, revision to April 13, 2020, and the design guidelines, second submittal dated April 14, 2020. These documents are digital and links to them have been widely publicized and available since mid-April. We recently discovered that a new set of design guidelines and drawings have been submitted, but this set of red lines are the ones from April and not the June ones. So just so everybody knows. And after a brief review and glance, it appears that not a lot of physical changes have been made. However, maybe somebody from New Urban West could clarify that. While these documents are draft and final, and a final vote of the Golf Course Committee and Council have not been called for, it would be premature for many reasons, such as all proposals are in draft and no environmental impact has been issued. There are certain aspects of what is being proposed that are sufficiently clear that the Golf Course Subcommittee will provide specific comments and proposals to the developer about what the Golf Course Committee believes would be acceptable aspects of this development, and for the most part have been mentioned many times in most, if not all, of the past community meetings for over the last year. I have one piece that I almost feel like it's too harsh to read, but I'm going to read it anyway. We heard at the last Planning Commission meeting that the developer was told to set the bar high. And as this community obviously cares, they could tell. Well, honestly, an opinion that is shared by many is that this project has fallen well short of that bar, as most of you know or should know as soon as you can. These guidelines and plans are obviously ignoring what the community's input has been given in the last 12 to 15 months and replacing our precious open spaces with walls of plop and drop type housing. They're ignoring our topography, our view sheds, putting thousands of people on streets and speeding vehicles into our streets, creating unsafe conditions, and as our community sits next to a very severe fire hazard zone. On top of all this, they're calling our development a transit priority area, which makes it easier, I guess, to pretend to ignore the traffic boondoggle coming our way. This development has revealed itself to turn its back on the existing residents of Carmel Mountain Ranch and only benefits itself and not to our community as a whole. So with that background, I'd like to I'm going into try to keep things simple and organized as I can. I have 4 topics to discuss tonight that are going to relate to the design guidelines. The 4 topics are: number 1, too much; number 2, too tall; number 3, too close; and number 4, too non-transparent. Number one is too much. The development needs to be no more than 200 to 220 units total. There are already examples throughout the county of things that have been done that have set almost precedents for the city to consider for development on a golf course. And that these seem reasonable for those neighborhoods nearby as well. Give an example of Stone Ridge Country Club, an agriculturally themed development of 159 homes with 100-foot buffers from existing homes on 3 sides. The Escondido Golf Course, which was done by New Urban West, has 380 homes with 188 condos, including 2-story buildings in a neighborhood of single-family homes. Half of the 109 acres is classified as open space with landscape buffers. Not doing that on purpose, sorry. So this increase in density is being proposed in Carmel Mountain Ranch by 30%. And on only 7% of Carmel Mountain Ranch property, which is I think about 110 of the 167 acres. These will impact things more like internal roads, congested intersections and cars, more freeway traffic, more noise, less clean air, less safe and healthy places, less safe emergency fire exits, more crowding in our retail and commercial areas, longer lines everywhere, more stress, more tension, more crime, eventually a deterioration and breakdown of our special master plan community. We all have been continually asked in our meetings that cluster development was not desired. Clustering is really a poor design choice along ridge tops because it ends up becoming and competing with their large, huge buildings, creating walls of tall housing, especially with apartments. You can tell what this means by looking at Jefferson, Carmel Terrace, Carmel Summit, Carmel Landing, and Carmel Mountain Ranch, which are located in the lower areas. Tall buildings in these, such as this, will block view corridors of all the hilltop, ridgetop homes and other places on the golf course that we have continually asked to be protected and preserved. Some of the key points are trying to keep new density closer to existing density, put high density housing and mixed use shopping areas. What we're suggesting is that this kind of development needs to be in really shopping areas and not in a single family home development. The city council wants high density and high buildings in every neighborhood, period. But our community is not against smart growth development, but this is not a good example of raising the bar as the Planning Commission suggests that they do. And it goes against smart design principles. So this is a key discussion point we can talk about later in terms of that. Can we really figure out what the density for Carmel Mountain Ranch is and suggest an equal density? We have asked for similar housing next to similar housing, not 3-4 stories butting up against existing 2-story family homes. This type of high density high rises needs to be built in or above the shopping centers and not among the single family homes. Sorry, I'm repeating some things because it's really a collection of thoughts. This would improve the efficiency by locating these in these areas of efficiency of transit and reduce vehicular miles, as well as traffic impact to our residential streets. We all will need to see actual and accurate scaled sections in these design guidelines between existing and new developments to show how the development meshes or doesn't mesh with each proposed unit. Their design guideline pretty pictures are actually very cartoon-like and misleading and wide open to interpretation. Item number 2 is too tall. We want 2-story residences maximum. At all of our Carmel Mountain Ranch Committee and Golf Course Committee meetings, we always ask to match up similar housing types to similar existing residences. So that means nothing higher than 2-story when it comes to next to 2-story homes. Even in our own development, the original designers, Presley of San Diego, saw the sense in putting taller 3- and 4-story apartment housing, such as the ones I mentioned earlier, Jefferson, Carmel Terrace, Carmel Summit, Carmel Landing, at the lower elevations with densely planted slopes and buffers in front of them, and access to large vehicular arterials, such as Rancho Carmel Road and Carmel Mountain Road, that are next and near the freeway, in order to protect and preserve views of the 2-story developments at the higher elevations in Carmel Mountain Ranch. This would minimize traffic in the single-family home areas. The Carmel Mountain Ranch Master Plan development was designed to rigorously conform to the topography of our ranch land and protect the community's investments and provide a way of life. Some of the key points for Too Tall: smart building, maximize transit, minimize vehicular miles units, shopping centers. Shopping centers are set apart from residential areas and served by bigger streets and can tolerate these large masses, transit, and types of housing units. Leave the view corridors between the two-story condos or apartments to allow more spacious feeling and take advantage of cool breezes. I think the city mantra is clustered buildings with more open space, but maybe this is wrong if the open/green space isn't usable. An increased availability of and access to open/green space promotes mental health. Even by just visual access, viewing corridors and natural scenery, it's clinically proven that open green space exposure helps reduce stress and restore ability of human beings to pay attention and concentrate. I, for one, that applies to me. None of the existing Carmel Mountain Ranch apartment houses or buildings rise above the adjacent housings because they are all downhill. All the multi-story apartment house buildings proposed by New Urban West are also being built on ground almost level with the adjacent homes. These should be terraced and more to conform with the topography and create more views and protect views. These are common design principles in the way that existing Carmel Ranch apartments were built in relation to the existing single-family homes. With including, being near major street arterials, dense landscape buffers, and grade changes. Any building should have upper stories step back at certain degrees to help reduce visual impacts. All stepping back of structure should even occur along the trails as well as on street side. In the design guidelines, there are height waivers. We don't want height waivers. They work contrary to zoning code intentions, balance size and impact against required functionality. Waivers really represent a bait and switch tactic. The flexibility for developer, not community. This is a no-go. Adjacent garages work well with single-family homes. You don't need to stack them. No clusters of tall buildings along community plan ridge lines, such as in Unit 9. It's damaging to the community feeling, blocks distant mountain views and view corridors that are shared by over 600 existing family homeowners and that they invested in. Item number 3, too close. We want 100-foot landscape buffer zones. In addition, we want firm 50 feet of densely planted landscape screens that are permanently irrigated, and then the other 50 feet for any pedestrian circulation elements needed and maybe additional landscape buffer. We have continually requested 100-foot landscape buffers between new and existing residences at each of our meetings when the situation came up, including the workshops. You can even see it on the notes marked up. Now we're learning that even when a 50-foot buffer was proposed by New Urban West in their guidelines, this bait and switch waiver occurred and turned out that only 15% of the landscape buffer could be left after the so-called vehicular infrastructure would be sharing those areas. How can you screen a 2-story building with 15 feet of landscape buffer is beyond me. A 20-foot tree won't even fit and creates maintenance nightmares. And if you look at their plant palette, all the trees are huge trees. The key points. What about the trail, the cart path, and the 50-foot landscape area? Well, I think if we're going to reutilize and retool those trails, that's fine, but new trails need to be really outside the 50-foot buffer zone. What about recreational amenities, exercise stations, benches, et cetera, in the 50-foot buffer? Well, all recreational amenities can be provided along trails. However, I feel they should be reviewed by our community group. Since most of the holes, the first 50 feet of landscape-only buffer areas must be clear of vehicular-rated circulation and support elements, such as drive aisles, parking areas, parking covers, garages, plus all the landscape buffers to be provided with a permanent irrigation system. I mentioned that earlier. But this is really to ensure establishment and long-term survival for those buffers. We are rejecting all 3- and 4-story buildings near the 2-story residential, so to keep our density equal. Current 15-foot landscape only minimum is too small in an areas to fit trees. I talked about that earlier, so I don't need to talk about that again. And the 4th item is transparent. These 2 non-transparent. We want all plans for permits submitted under a substantial conformance review process too. We understand that this is a city procedural matter, but our community public wants transparency to review, and they have the opportunity to comment on any and all final building plans through build out. So in actuality is after New Urban West plans are, say they get approved and they go to a developer, we need to, again, start reviewing plans that get proposed because the new developments are going to change based on the design guidelines. We want that opportunity to look at those drawings. We're an existing master plan community, and it should be only fair to have the neighboring public express what we want in our communities where we have lived and invested for almost 40 years. Carmel Mountain Ranch, in a matter of fact, in its infancy had Presley of San Diego with community support groups, providing reviews of all their developments through build out. Our concern is it's a fact that even though the developer was continually asked, they never offered or divulged any of their housing concepts, desired density and size until the 18th community meeting, which was right before the city, almost before the city submission. This is not transparency. Design guidelines, key points. Design guidelines are too cartoon-like, and descriptions are not realistic depictions of actual Carmel Mountain Ranch conditions, existing versus new, making understanding much more difficult of what we're seeing. We need to have real sections of all unit areas to be able to understand what's really going on. Design guideline document fails to address effects of site space limitations and topographical challenges. We are suggesting ADA compliance for our trails. This is for public access, correct? The existing Carmel Mountain Ranch Clubhouse is at 810-foot elevation, and the transit priority area in Sabre Springs is at 537. This is a 280-foot change elevation, and the clubhouse is 1.8 miles away. This is not a TPA compliant or accessible even for senior citizens or the disabled if they wanted to try to get to the TPA. The vision descriptions paint a vague picture of how the trails could connect the community. For a project to be called the Trails, a realistic and accessible trail system needs to be built to promote mobility, safety, and access for all of its users. Trails are likely to be used really only for walking and exercise, but really for commuting or shopping. It appears that most of the amenities that are shown could be misinterpreted to be just for community use, but it more than likely will end up being for only the new housing resident use. And those were the things that we were preached the first 5-10 meetings, talking about open space and amenities and parks and things like that. So what will ensure that new developments will not restrict access to their residents only? I think that's one of the reasons we want the process too, because that way we'll be able to see what's happening and going on. So that's my my little spiel. It took a little longer than normal, but I just kind of wanted to talk. That's sort of a brief intro into this the guidelines. So with that, I will. Everybody can still see the title sheet for the April 14th submittal on the design guidelines.
Yes.
Okay. Some of the things I may have already talked about, and I did talk about a project that's really called the Trails, should really be able to offer amenities to many types of users and walkers, hikers, runners, bird watchers, etc. If you're called the Trails, you need to do something with the trails. Multi-use trail requires planning for width, maintainable surfaces such as really concrete, not decomposed granite. That's just not sustainable. There's vertical clearance to be concerned about in terms of ADA conformance. And then there's the trail amenities such as benches and drinking fountains in shaded areas, rest areas. These are all valuable amenities to pedestrians. Where dogs are permitted, providing dog-friendly drinking fountains and bag dispensers and trash bins necessary to encourage people to pick up after their dogs. This should all be part of the guidelines. There's also nothing really talked about in terms of ADA compliance, which would relate to seniors and disabled. Where does this occur? Most of the trails right now are talking about using a 5 to 8 foot, which is really falls short. Multi-use trails need to be within the 10 to 12 foot range to accommodate just typical one-way traffic. And even if you have two-way traffic, the trail should even be wider in terms of 12 to 14 feet. Again, talking in terms of the connecting neighborhoods with a network of trails, paseos. I'm just making comments again about ADA compliance. And there are a lot of cart paths that need to probably be adapted to help accommodate some of that. The elevation changes between a lot of the different holes is pretty amazing and not ADA accessible, which is not less than 5% with no handrails. And then if you go to 8%, you have to have handrails. So enhance natural resources and open spaces. So the trails that CMR preserves approximately 67% of the golf course is open space. But this is also a lot of opportunities for community amenities that we need to try to look into more. And I'll talk about those later. Again, talking about
What are you gonna do tonight? Well, I'm gonna try to get the volume back on here.
I'll try and figure out who that is and mute them.
On your laptop.
Folks,
Again,
if you're not presenting, please mute yourself.
There's discussion here about a 50-foot setback buffer zone, but we're saying this really needs to be 100-foot. And new development needs to provide ample space for trails, landscape, and robust screening. And I would just ask the definition of robust. Robust is not 15 feet.
Uh-oh.
All right.
Right.
Quick hands here.
Where is the volume on this?
Kurt,
Oh, here, maybe I
as the host, you have the mute
can
all
get down the
button.
volume.
If
There
you
we
look
go.
at the participant window all the way at the bottom, there's a mute all button.
It's Margaret is the person talking.
Oh,
You weren't muted?
My remote is not. I'm not seeing that, Eric. I'm just
all
gonna
right.
keep.
Don't. It's cool. Keep rolling. I think we're good now.
Then there's development standards, and they talk about accessible area for site and storage and disposal. I'm just saying that these storage areas should really not be located between the existing and new homes. And then again, there's some more talking about the trail. This is a chart on page 9 of the design guidelines addressing lot zoning deviations and waivers that I was talking about sooner. And here we're just basically saying that the community, we want similar housing types adjacent to residential. And these heights are asking for waivers to go over and above the heights that we have planned for currently in our master plan and for our community. And then again, there's markups there about the buffer zones. And then a waiver for some of the setbacks, rear yard and setbacks. And I think we want to be able to control our views. There you go. So we want to continue to preserve views, corridors of nearby hills. That's really important. Now this is a zoning map, and so let me kind of go through this here. So you'll see the red dots, and this is I put this on a zoning map, which is talking and showing from low residential to the high residential, and then it shows the commercial areas and open space. The colors though that are shown are really for the parks that I've brought to light. So for example, New Urban West on their design guidelines and their drawings that they submitted proposed 3 public park sites. Those are those red dots that you see on Unit 13, Unit 7, and Unit 16. And those are located in pretty good places. They're located off of Side Street. They allow access by everybody. So public, meaning not just the development, the new development, but also Carmel Mountain Ranch, existing Carmel Ranch residents. The yellow dots are representing New Urban West proposed neighborhood park sites. These parks are not accessible. They're only accessible by the units that are the new units that are being built currently, as far as the way we are understanding them. So, and there are 3 of these shown, and they're located around Unit 1, Unit 9, and Unit 8. And they're really at the back 40 of the development. You have to come in off the street and drive all the way to the back. And it wouldn't be for community use, so just so you know that. So then the green and is proposed park sites that I looked at, and I thought, well, if we have 67% more of open space that's available, why can't we make some more green spaces available for the community, for general public, not just for the new development? And those are those green boxes there. And you can see where I'm showing them. Unit 5, I'm showing one, along Interstate 15. There's over by Unit 2 or the Unit 4, which is the green space that goes along Interstate 15. Those are big, huge open spaces. They could be athletic fields. They could be a soccer field for kids. It could be, a small minor softball field area. It could also be a small neighborhood park. It could have a playground in it. And those are things that could be nice to have. And then the purple are the existing park sites that we currently have now. And then there are another couple of neighborhood park sites that we're also suggesting could happen. And those are the blue dots. And those again are the kind of the same thing, similar to what New Urban West had proposed, but just take advantage of some of this open space. How does that look for having open space?
What does the red slotch in Unit 17 mean?
Let's see, Unit 17. Are you talking, this is Unit 17 right here.
Yeah.
Oh, this is right here?
Yeah, you moved. The map is gone.
Over by the library, I don't know.
Okay.
Oh, community, it says community commercial on their zoning map. So that good catch.
That's right behind my house. Okay.
So these are some development standards. And again, it's more repetitive. Some of the densities that they're proposing were obviously not on the same page. The setbacks are also not on the same page. They conflict with 100-foot buffers that we're asking adjacent to the existing residential areas. The maximum heights are too tall. They don't match similar housing requests that the community has been continually asking. And then parking. We don't want to see any parking between our homes and these new developments along in these old golf course areas. And that's, carports, vehicular access areas. You don't want car engines with the smoke and exhaust fumes coming into our bedrooms, windows at night, right? So again, just some more markups on these, talking about the landscape buffers and making sure they are planted densely. Just some keywords. Again, this is sort of a cartoon below a section. It doesn't really mean anything. You know, it's really kind of a, they haven't really gone and graded anything down at this extreme. And I think we need to have accurate, actual sections that show, so we know that we are looking at and represent what we're reviewing and looking at. Because this doesn't really mean anything. It's just a pretty picture. All right. I have a trigger finger, sorry. All right, I didn't touch it. So in terms of transition buffers, edges, and screenings, one of the suggestions we're saying for this 100-foot zone is to have the first 50 feet zone be purely landscape. In some areas, there will be some of the existing trails, but and when new trails come in, those will be outside of this first 50-foot zone area. We're also just suggesting the second-foot zone area, you know, be able to utilize more pedestrian circulation elements in those areas as well. And the 15 feet landscape area is unacceptable. And then you can see I've marked up on their landscape buffer plans the same thing. And that these buffer zones are just showing are just too small. They're just way too small. And they're going to be building their buildings right up at those easement lines, into that buffer zone. So, there's no guarantee that that's going to be what they say. And just seeing what happened when they started adding infill into this 50-foot zone was very disappointing and frankly, just really not very transparent. Again, just showing, we don't want vehicular areas between the existing and new residential. We want actual to scale sections for each unit area. Parking areas should be designed to minimize their visual impact with trees. So that would be on the street sides, outside the frontage roads areas where those would go. Again, just talking about building scale, massing, and articulation. These buildings should be laid out to help preserve view corridors for the existing residential. Cannot stress this enough. This is an anti-cluster statement of what I'm saying right now, is that we have been saying this all along, and that has been ignored. Again, just some more markups. Get to some other plans. Preserving view corridors, shielding areas. A lot of their illustrations in our townhomes are all showing 3-story, which is really unacceptable. No parking between existing residential and new. It's a repeat. 2-story height only. Again, no. These 2-story heights only. You can see what those look like. Their recreation open space typologies. We'd like to see a lot of these items proposed along the community trails and in publicly used areas by the Carmel Mountain Ranch community, not just for the new development. Sustainability should be an important concern for the integration of bringing in landscape, drought tolerant plant materials, but we still recommend that they be permanently irrigated. I mentioned that already. I'll go through this here as fast as I can. I know. Sorry there's just a lot to say here. Okay, so we have a couple of illustrations that they've shown their parks on and their open space on. And I'm just going to kind of go down from top to bottom here. So this is the one unit that's showing, unit 1 that's showing a park on the far northeast corner of it. It is obvious that this park is not, there's no access to it really by the community. There's no vehicular access. And it really appears to be more of a park for the development itself. A more suitable area that would have more community access would be off the main street that runs there off of, oh gosh, I'm getting my street names, off of Windcrest Lane would be a better place. And then in the yellow areas, I'm showing a landscape buffer zones, 100-foot landscape buffer zones. And then on this particular unit, there are some interesting specimen trees that would be nice to be able to save those trees if possible. To try to retain some existing landscape buffer zones that work well. Oh, then there's also view corridors. This hole always had a great view, to the southwest. So this is Unit 7, and Unit 7 is the old hole, depending on when you played golf, the old hole 7. And they're showing a public park in this area. Again, this is a park that would be, I wouldn't necessarily call it a public park because it doesn't really have vehicular access. It's almost impossible to get, you'd be using small carts or Cushmans to get access. So this would need access. And it's also difficulty for having surveillance in areas and parks like this. So public parks should really have more public access, and eyes of the public can watch and see what's going on. City of San Diego would not ever allow a public park developed like this. Okay, this is Unit 8. And again, the areas in yellow are showing the 100-foot buffer zones. This was the old hole number 8, par 5 that went up the hill. And they're showing a park at the far end where the putting green used to be. Access would only be by trail. And again, this would be difficult to get to, and appears to be a park just for the development itself. I'll get rid of this. No, I can't get rid of that. But then there's also, again, it'd be nice to have a park, that park, instead of having it at that end, having it down at the other end along, I think it's Shoal Creek Drive, that would make it accessible for everybody. Keeping in mind that this development area has a questionable driveway that creates a lot of hazards for traffic, with multiple driveways being so close next to each other. This is holes, actually holes 9 and 18 when they come together, calling it Unit 9, showing the buffer zones to be indicated here. That would be, the drawings seem to be plopping these 300 units on top of the grade here in this area. And we're suggesting that this would be a great place to break it up with some open space and create a little more centrally located park area. It's closer and has safer access for neighborhood use. You could even keep the clubhouse, as we had talked about off and on, as a rec center or community building, and you have parking there already. This would help preserve some of the neighborhood view corridors and break up the clustering of buildings and the wall of residential buildings that they're proposing. There's really some incredible view corridors here that should really be shared and not just for, taken away by and put in by somebody new. We all invested a lot of money in our homes. This is Unit 9 between Unit 8 and Unit 9, the old hole number 8, I think it's called. And again, there's a hazardous entry point of driveway that comes into that spot off of that one street. I can't remember. It's called Eastbourne Road. I should know that. Eastbourne Road. And then they're showing an open space area that's, this is very steep. And I would imagine this would be a good place. They would have to do some kind of an ADA switchback trail to provide equitable access, through the trail system areas. There's a few more pages here. Again, this is units 12 and 13. And on my earlier drawing, I suggested a park at the off of hole 12. There is a cul-de-sac that comes in off of the road next to Spirit. I can't remember that name of that road, but it would be in this area if you could see my mouse. And that could be an area where people could drive up, and there could be a few parking stalls, and a park could actually be in this area, a small area. They are providing another park location, which I think is a good location for a park, and it would work well. But I'm wondering how they're going to get rid of all those giant boulders. This is hole 15 or unit 15. And again, this would be a really great area to have a park, a Carmel Ridge Road. You come right off the edge there. Be a neighborhood park, but it would be easily accessible. Has good visibility from the road. Unit 16, I'm showing the 100-foot landscape buffer zones that need to be indicated, around the development. And then again, at the end of hole, I guess it's 15. It's also a good example of a public park. This is the third and final one that they show on their guidelines. Again, I'm gonna appeal to this. This is just some word editing. But one thing that it would be nice to have in these guidelines is a discussion and more of a description of what a densely planted landscape buffer means. Like, for example, establishment of trees and shrubs within a certain time period. And also that would create, if you say you had, 3 shrubs or 5 shrubs per 100 square feet, it would just be something to add a quantity to make sure that the landscape areas are taken seriously and not just hydroseeded. And then, let's see. And then again, this is the plant palette, and you can see on here the tree sizes that they're expecting. 50-foot height with 10 to 40-foot spread. They're not 10, they're going to be more than 10. Riparian trees, 20 to 50-foot spread. Screening trees, 30 to 80 feet spread. I mean, you can't put these in 15-foot areas, much less 50-foot areas. So you need more area and more space. So that's, the point I was trying to make. You need to make room for the landscape buffer zones. Okay, I think that's it, Eric. I just dump this back, stop my share.
Stop your share, and then we need to figure out how to hand the hosting back to me. So stop sharing first, and then it should become evident how to, let's see, more, Kurt. How do I get it back? I've done this before.
Kurt needs to right click on your name and make you host.
Thank you, Brian. Kurt, right mouse on my name, and then there might be a more button or something, and make me host again.
Oh yeah, there it is. Voila.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so what we need to do now is go through the subcommittee members and get their their comments either on what you've presented or any of their own thoughts. And thank you for taking the time to go through those, and especially the hole by hole. I think that's helpful for people to see what's going on. You just give me a second here to sort of reorganize my screen. I'm going to go ahead and mute all real quick. We got some background noise from a couple of people, so I'll go back through and unmute as needed now. All right, Kurt. Okay, so I'll move this over here. Rick, I don't see Rick. I don't think Rick's here. Looking for Rick Smith. Okay, so I'm gonna reserve any comment on everything until other people have had a chance. Rich is up. Hang on a second, Rich. I'm gonna find you and unmute you. There you are, Rich. Rich, do you have any comments about this or anything else having to do with the design guidelines?
Just very short. I think Kurt summarized my main concerns. I like the too close and too high. So everything I would want to say or add was in Kurt's presentation.
Thank you. Let's see. I'm going to find Mark Clark. Where did he go?
I'm here. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, there you are. Okay, good.
Hey.
Mark, you're up.
Yeah, not a lot to say except, first of all, thanks, Kirk, for going through all that. I would agree. Am I on still?
You're on.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so wanted to thank Kirk again, and then just to agree with, first of all, the ADA piece with the trails. You know, they do need to be ADA compliant because we do have, you know, in this community, folks who've lived here a long time who might be getting into their senior years, and I think it's important that we give them a good access. And I do agree with the buffer. You know, when it was a 50-foot buffer, it's like, okay, that's not great, but it's better than nothing. But then to realize that, you know, they could put driveways and things like that as part of that 50-foot, and that was a 50-foot aggregate, just kind of doesn't seem right. I don't want to be negative or think the worst case, but in the worst case, those buffers could be pretty darn small. So I think the idea of 100-foot buffer is a really good idea, and I think that that's what we could ask them to do. So those are just my only comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Michelle Mullen, I'm going to find you and unmute you unless you're able to unmute yourself.
Yes,
yeah,
I've unmuted myself, Eric.
Good. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, so thank you, Kurt. I was able to read your comments prior to this meeting, and I found them to be very thorough, so I appreciate that. I agree with the too high and too close. And I also agree with the transparency piece. I have been to every meeting but one, and I still have many, many questions, particularly around the vegetation, around the buffer. How close can things get? Where will that be? What plants will be where? What will that look like? How tall really are all of these buildings going to be? I have so many questions still, even after attending every meeting. So I think the transparency piece is To me, that's really important. I don't actually know what it's going to look like. So that's all for now.
Thank
I
you.
reserve the right to comment later.
Absolutely. John Schroeder. There you go.
Okay. Yeah, Kurt, I thought that was really worth it. It was worth it to step through it in detail like that. Take the time and look at all the different aspects of the design. I want to make a couple comments just to add a little more background to the discussion. And kind of, you mentioned it a little bit, Kurt, the Planning Commission meeting where this project got its approval, the initiation approval. That was back July 25th, 2019. And I want to explain why I think that this project doesn't appear to me to be what the Planning Commission was looking for based on comments at that meeting. I'm going to take a few minutes here and just give a quote from 5 of the planning commissioners to make my point. Now, even though our community council voted against this initiation for this project, the Planning Commission voted 5-1 in favor of the project. So there was one planning commissioner who voted against the project, and that commissioner was Commissioner Hoffman, who's the vice chair of the Planning Commission. And he spoke about how the project was inconsistent with our community plan. He mentioned how the golf course, or the open space strips of land, was a critical coherent component of the community plan. And he noted that development would change the entire character of our community. And what he said was, he said it would be difficult to get his vote for a plan that just goes and chops up the golf course into little development pieces. And his quote was, "This really doesn't make sense to me." So he voted against the initiation. Commissioner Otsuji, he actually worked on about half of Carmel Mountain Ranch when it was built. And he's been in the business quite a long time, very familiar with Carmel Mountain Ranch. And he talked about it's important that the developer works with the community. And his quote was, "The golf course was designed as part of the neighborhood more than anything else." He continued to say, quote, "There's 167 acres, and my expectation is going to be that, and hopefully it's going to be lower than this, that you develop 20 to 40% of that, and the rest of it is going to be open space." The third quote I'd like to give is from Commissioner Whalen. And he spoke about how he recognized the difficulties in developing skinny, narrow strips of land snaking through the neighborhood. He noted that it was not a typical development footprint. But he said, quote, "I'm not okay with the fact that the property owner is not communicating with the community." So he was a little disappointed that the Wang family wasn't speaking with us. The fourth commissioner I'd like to quote is Commissioner Austin. And he spoke about weighing the concerns of open space for our residents and preserving that versus the housing shortage in San Diego. And he also noted the challenge of developing narrow strips of land snaking through the community. He said he'd like to see the developer create a solution that would provide housing, but also keep open space. And he was mentioning, he said, hey, 300 units could be built on 10 acres. So his quote was, "We're going to demand that this is one of the most sensitive, innovative projects in San Diego, and sets a model, a very, very high bar for San Diego, and that these homeowners at the end of this will be pleased enough that they are going to get behind you." He continued, quote, "You come back with something that just gobbles up those fairways, doesn't provide buffers, is not creative, and doesn't also allow for housing where the biggest need is, which is middle income, you're not going to get approved." And the final quote I have is from Commissioner Boomhauer. He talked about how he wants to see some starter housing included. And his quote was, "Be prepared to show us every step of the way how you engaged with the community. You've got to show us that you've been working in good faith. So those are 5 quotes. And when I look at this development that's been presented with what I feel has been little to no engagement with our community, you know, we weren't even told how many units till about a week before it was submitted to the developer. We were given no chance to provide input on number of units, where the units might be located, number of stories in the buildings. To me, it just doesn't seem like it's what the Planning Commission had in mind. Again, they're looking for 20 to 40% or less developed. That's 60 to 80% left or more left as open space. They said, don't gobble up the fairways. They said, don't chop it into little development pieces. There was a mention of 300 units on 10 acres, presumably maybe the rest left open space. That was just a comment he made. So for me, it's going to be interesting to see how the Planning Commission accepts this 1,200 unit project with no community engagement. And it'll be interesting to see if this is what they had in mind. My opinion is no, based on what I heard. That's my inference from the Planning Commission meeting. So I think this discussion tonight was appropriate and useful and long overdue.
Thank you, John. And then Kurt, I think we've, do you need to be unmuted again right now, Kurt? Are you good? He's good. Okay. All right. So yeah, I mean, to echo what John just said, you know, I was at that Planning Commission hearing as well, and I wasn't as detailed in my recollection of it as others have been. However, what I did get from their comments was a lot of those commissioners recognize what an important part of San Diego Carmel Mountain Ranch is, and the desire by them that if it was going to be touched, that it would be done in a very careful way. And I appreciate might be the wrong word. I can appreciate from a business perspective the desire by New Urban West to do exactly what they're proposing. So from that perspective, I understand it. As a resident of Carmel Mountain Ranch and all the things that make Carmel Mountain Ranch important to me, this definitely falls short of the mark. I mean, the trail system would be absolutely awesome if it was big enough, if it was ADA compliant, if everybody could use it, all the things that we've already said. Just stacking all those units on that ridge top there where the clubhouse is now, it just kind of breaks my heart. I know the land is for sale, and I know somebody's got to make money developing it, and I know the city of San Diego wants it done, not specifically in Carmel Mountain Ranch, but they've made clear their intent to allow more infill developments like this in single family areas. That intention has been made clear by the city council, but we're getting a new city council, a largely new city council in November. So, you know, I want this to work for everyone, but I don't see that it does in its current state. So that's my comment on it. So, boy, I guess, well, actually, I put in the agenda, I want to find Harold, because I want to get Harold's input real quick here, and it doesn't have to be real quick. I'm unmuting you. There you are. So Harold Klotz he's declined to join the subcommittee as a community member. However, he has put extensive time, much like Kurt and others of us, into reviewing what's there. And I just wanted Harold to get your input after hearing Kurt's comments and the other subcommittee comments, if you had anything else to add or any anything.
Couple of things. I noticed along the way someone asked what the minimum buffer unit or buffer size was. Currently, it's 15 feet. Thanks to one of the plan and review planners, it was changed from should be a minimum of 15 feet landscaped to, in the most recent guidelines, shall be. So we definitely will get 15 feet. Unfortunately, that's how long a Honda or a Toyota Prius is. So no, we're not going to fit any 30-foot spread trees in that space. And so for me, the buffer issue is a big issue, and the quality and accuracy of the illustrations in the design guideline are unchanged from the first release. And there still remains the statement in the illustration going along with the buffers that says, oh, in 50 feet, there's plenty of room for multiple rows of trees. And they show just landscaping. And as Kurt pointed out, nowhere are there realistic, accurate depictions of what is planned, possibly, or certainly what is possible. Because of the fact that the developer has declined to release any of the housing plans, and so we're just left to assume that their actions on the housing side of things will be consistent with their behaviors on the rest of this project, which is to say that we have to assume that the worst case is what's going to happen. So there are multiple places in the design guidelines where, number one, it's never clear what parts of the trail system or the multiple parks and entertainment areas are going to be public accessible. It seems like, other than the 3 proposed city-owned and operated parks, that everything else that's shown as an amenity is accessible only via the trail system. And on the current plan set, their recreation easement is shown exactly along the side of the trails. So if the trail is 8 feet wide, there's a recreation easement for public recreation for those 8 feet. But there's no talking or no indication what parts of the amenities that you go by on the trail will be designed or expected to be used by the public. And a lot of those trails, in particular, the one that jumps out at me is the dog park at the south end of Unit 15. That, I believe it is, yeah, it's about 35 feet in rise if you're standing at the very corner of Ted Williams and Highland Ranch Parkway, and you go up that hill to that dog park, which is not accessible in any other way except through that trail. And saying that expects that they're going to connect that path out to the sidewalk and not keep it just stuck to the tunnels. So in general, and also all the vignettes that we see throughout the design guidelines, everything is flat ground. It exists in a little wonderland where the grass is always green and there's always pretty trees and there's lots of open spaces. All the lawns are nice and wide, but that just doesn't represent what the community is. Our community, as Kurt pointed out, there's a rise of almost 300 feet from the top to the bottom, or the bottom to the top. And the way the streets are, And the way the trails are, they were designed to connect the holes. They weren't designed to connect the community features. So it's just, they'll be great walking trails and they'll be great for exercises and dog walking. But to represent that they're going to be improving our connectivity, that someone's going to walk from their house to the shopping center, going up and down some 50, 100, 200 feet, I think is unreasonable. And also that they might go to the transit center on any of these trails is just, it's unrealistic. And I think that these points are talked up in the brochures, they're in this design guidelines, and they're also on the web pages, which is what any outside person is going to look at. What I would like to see the subcommittee and the council do is somehow externalize the realities of this is what our community really looks like. It's an up and down place that's great if you have a car, but it is not a walkable neighborhood. And we've come to live with that, and we'll be able to exercise here, but it's just not going to be a smart city, smart village, city of villages, whatever it's called, and or TPA area that's going to work for everybody. The 2 units at 5 and 6 potentially actually will work as TPA, but in terms of traffic dumping onto Rancho Carmel Drive at that intersection, it's going to be pretty ugly, especially when you add in the Alante traffic. So that's about it for me right now.
Thank you, Harold. We appreciate you. So let's see. Are there any other subcommittee comments or any other business on this item? Kurt, hang on, I'll unmute you. Go ahead, Kurt.
Oh, I think Harold brought up some good points, and I think it kind of reminded me of, you know, when I moved to Carmel Mountain in 1986, I was living in Waterfield Laurels, which is down along the 15, and the golf course was done. The golf course was all built out. It was in play. And it was set, and all the development came and was built around the golf course with not much change. The golf course was a big selling feature for Carmel Mountain Ranch. It was amazing. I mean, they really put, you can tell by the clubhouse, they put such a focus on it. I mean, you know, the whole idea and everything. So I'm thinking that you know, this thing with the trails really needs to be pushed out there and maybe even be built first, like the golf course was built first. I'm suggesting that this trail should be built with the priorities in mind, with the connections to the little neighborhood parks where these little mobile huts even that New Urban West provided and showed. All these connections to the little neighborhood parks too. And that would be built and set first. And I think you need to do that because you're gonna need, you got the space. I mean, you're gonna need ADA compliance. You're gonna have to do, you know, trails ease, and you know, no one's gonna wanna have handrails and that kind of thing. And I think it's something to really think about. So I'll just leave it at that, but build the trails first, and then let the development come as we suggested.
Okay. Any other subcommittee comments on this item?
Am I still on?
You are.
So if nobody's going to make any further talk about it, I'd kind of like to entertain a motion.
Okay.
And I have a couple things floating in my head. I'm just thinking that, you know, the motion would be something along the lines of recommend that the Carmel Mountain Ranch Subcommittee, our subcommittee recommend to the community group that they take the positions that we're advocating for in the red line comments and in our discussion tonight to be implemented, you know, that were in the New Urban West guidelines and plans. I think that should be, you know, we're basically saying that we're rejecting the 1,200 units. Hold on a second here. I just had a note to myself that you know, the golf course subcommittee, I move that the golf course subcommittee inform New Urban West through our community group that we object to the proposal for 1,200 units, and that the guidelines and plans be subjected to the red lines that we submitted tonight. However, that the golf course committee could support a proposal for the density being within the range of 200 to 250 units, in addition to the topics that we covered tonight in the red lines.
So to be clear, you're making a motion that this golf course subcommittee recommend to the full Carmel Mountain Ranch Sabre Springs Community Council that they adopt the position that you just outlined.
Yeah, we object to the proposal for 1,200 units, and that that we adopt the positions outlined in the red line comments and the design guidelines.
Okay. Are there any subcommittee members who are unclear on what the motion is, or any that want to second the motion?
Hi, this is Rich. Do we want to hear from anyone else in the community or anyone else before going forward, or?
Well, we have public comment scheduled at the end. We could certainly entertain comments or questions from the community on this, I suppose. Looking at the chat, there's one or two questions. I don't know if I think in order to, well, I guess is there anyone in the community who would object to us taking this position? I mean, I would signify so in the chat if you feel like you need to add or modify anything that we're talking about doing here. I'm going to scroll through the participant list for raised hands, and I mean, I'm not seeing any. Oh, well, Jerry Smith has his hand up. I'm going to unmute Jerry, and we'll let him ask. Or Jerry.
Okay, here's what I'd like to say. I'm a retired military person, and a little bit on the street smart. They haven't even met the requirements for the landscaping right now, the weed control. How can you trust them to go ahead with telling lies, right?
Did anybody? Your audio is really okay. I'm Jerry. I had to mute you again because your audio is we can't understand what you're saying. It's very a lot of static. I'm looking at some of the comments here. I mean, there's a motion on the floor. There's a motion on the floor, and I think we need to either get a second on the motion or not at this point, and then we can move on to community comments. And if there's a modification that needs to be made, we can make it. But I'm starting to see a lot of comments that are going to start us in a meandering sort of conversation here. So there is a motion on the floor, and rules of order would dictate that we either get a second on the motion or not. So is there a subcommittee member that wants to second the motion?
This is Mark. I'll second.
Mark? Say
Yep,
again,
Mark
please.
Clark. Mark Clark, I'll second.
Okay. All right. Well, then we have a motion and a second. And well, hang on. Oh boy. I just got rid of all of my. Oh, there it is. Okay. Motion and a second. So I'm going to go through the list and see if, this motion carries. It doesn't mean this is the last, word that we're going to have on this. It's just Kurt has suggested that we suggest to the full board that this position be adopted. And then I think we can discuss further how we might implement or carry this feeling forward to the city. So okay,
Eric, we should allow for discussion now before taking any vote.
Okay, that's what I've been asking if there are any more items of discussion. Okay. So you have something else, John?
Well, yeah, I'd like to amend the motion such that we delay the vote until after hearing public comment. So that I would need a second on that motion.
So this is Rich. So I'm kind of there with John. I think personally, I like exactly what Kurt said, but I want to hear from the public first before I vote yes. So I'll second John's motion.
Okay, so we have a motion to amend the motion, and I think it's, my comment would be that we can go ahead and kind of push this to the end after the public comment. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
My only objection to doing anything differently was just that we had a motion on the floor that had to go one way or the other. So with that, we are now voting on John Schroeder's amendment to Kurt's motion to push this to the end of the agenda, and I think we do need to get that formalized so that we can stay within the compliance of the meeting here. So, Kurt, how do you vote on that?
I vote yes.
John?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Yes. Mark Clark?
Yes.
Rich Craigie?
Yes.
Okay, I'll support that. And we're actually going to hear from New Urban West in between now and then as well. So we're going to move this to essentially what would be agenda item number 8 at this point. Okay. And, I see a lot of comments, keep the plan. Are we giving up on agricultural zoning? I mean, the job of the subcommittee, I will point out, is to work with the developer and to attempt to make the plan better. There are other groups and other individuals within Carmel Mountain Ranch that are working to purely, well, I shouldn't say purely oppose because that makes it sound like a negative, but it is not the job of this subcommittee to be an opposition group. And so what we're attempting to do here is, should this be ultimately approved by the city, we want it to be the best it can be. And if the subcommittee sits on its hands and just says no, 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 then it's going to go through as is to the city, and we will have had no opportunity to shape it. So that's what we're attempting to do here. And we will leave the keep the plan and the opposition to any development to the other groups that are differently organized. We're chartered by the city under City Council Policy 600-24, which gives us a very specific and narrow mandate. So with that, this agenda item is concluded, and I want to unmute Michael Prinz from the planning department here, because agenda item number 5, as I had written it, was basically how do we, as a community group, get these ideas from the community, from the subcommittee, from the main board? How do we aggregate these ideas and get them integrated or at least noticed by the planners who are working on this? And so that is kind of the discussion I'd like to bring Michael in on, if I can find him. And I warned you it was going to be a long meeting. Where did he go? I know.
Hi, this is Diego Velasco. Michael wanted to let me let you know that he is coming on shortly.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he was here. He must have had.
I think he had to step away for a CPC meeting.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's, I was supposed to, well, okay. Esther Berry's attending that one for me tonight.
But he'll be back shortly is what he.
All right, well then let's go to New Urban West, and then we'll come back to this discussion. Agenda item number 5 we'll come back to after we hear an update from New Urban West, and you know, they might have reaction to what they've heard thus far. So Jonathan, I see, I will unmute. Jonathan.
Hey, good evening, Eric.
Good evening.
And good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to address you and to provide a quick update on the project. Again, my name is Jonathan Frankel with New Urban West, and I'm our Director of Planning. And we've been to most of the names on the participants list here, very familiar faces. Certainly, we've been here many times with the subcommittee and with the full board of the community council. So. Firstly, we appreciate the detailed comments that Kurt and others provided on the plans. I think certainly we're going to take a look at all of those, and we're going to take them under consideration. So it's always helpful when we have more detail rather than less detail. And so we appreciate you spending so much time doing it, and we will take everything under consideration. We currently continue to work through the city cycle review process to address all of the city's comments. As most of you know, that is a very robust and lengthy process that includes reviews from public safety departments such as fire, police, as well as public works, as well as engineering, traffic, of course. And all of those reviews are to ensure that the plans meet all of the requirements for safety and for design standards that are included in the City of San Diego Municipal Code. So as we work through that, the plans will change. They are subject to change as the plan reviewers are taking a look at each one of the plan sets, reviewing it for consistency with the city's goals and objectives, their code requirements, and their policies. And so you will see changes and modifications to the plan as we continue to move through this process. The design guidelines, it's been a substantial discussion tonight on them, and those continue to be reviewed by city staff and will be modified in accordance with their comments. A couple of things that I heard that I wanted to discuss and just mention very briefly. Firstly, Kurt, glad that you like the location of the park in Unit 16. I got maybe 2 of 3 there. So glad that we got you with at least one. But just to recap on the amenities that are proposed, I want to talk about the accessibility of the amenities to the existing residents because I know that's very important. As Kurt mentioned, approximately 70% of this property is preserved as permanent open space. So approximately 30% of the property being developed with residential uses. A 6.5-mile trail network. And the trail network is really an adaptive reuse, as most of you know, of the existing cart paths. So that doesn't mean we're ripping all of that out and pouring new concrete and creating everything new. That we want to adaptively reuse what is there in order to create a publicly accessible amenity, whereas before that was private. You had to pay your $60 and get on a cart and get in it. And so that 6.5-mile trail system and trail network is extremely unique in the city of San Diego. That proposal is pretty much unparalleled in terms of a publicly accessible trail network. While the trails will be public, they are privately owned and maintained. So the trails will not be owned and operated by the city of San Diego. And we did that intentionally to make sure that we could maintain them and operate the trails. However, as I think it was perhaps Harold mentioned, that there will be public easements, access and recreation easements recorded in those areas, ensuring that existing members of the community can use the trail. I've heard, I think from Harold and from Kurt, you know, really good for walking, good for jogging, good for walking your dog. All three of those were things that we heard from the community when we surveyed the community very early on. We got about 500 responses to that survey, and, you know, walking, walk your dog, places to rest, things like that, were very high on the list. And so I think the 6.5 mile trail network reflects that. There's approximately 9 acres of park, and that's public park, as Kurt mentioned, in those 3 locations. And so we think that's a great complement to the larger regional community parks that are existing today in the Carmel Mountain Recreation Center and Highland Ranch Park. We think those are going to be nice complements, and the idea is that people can walk to those parks and that they will be accessible. Just a couple of comments quickly on the buffer. Certainly appreciate and understand that that is a concern in the community, privacy. So the buffer areas are a minimum of 15 feet. So the current rear yard setback, meaning the required distance from the property line to the structure in the current community, is generally 10 feet. So the 50-foot buffer is 5 times greater than the existing rear yard setback in the community. Now, that area, whereas 15 feet, it is correct, that is required to be landscaped, the total amount of buffer area that can be used for anything other than landscaping and trails is limited to 35%. So 65% of that buffer area is dedicated to landscaping, trails, and really open space, pure open space uses. Cannot be used for parking, cannot be used for circulation, cannot be used for any other purpose. And so effectively, that's about 33 feet. 33 feet of that 50-foot area, about 65% of it, will be dedicated to landscaping, trails, and other items. So it is incorrect, it is inaccurate to say that it will only be a 15-foot area. In fact, it will be a minimum of approximately 33 feet, and the other areas can be used for other purposes. However, no structures whatsoever can be built there, and we are required to record deed restrictions that prevent structures from being built in those areas. Furthermore, the design guidelines do address landscaping, specifically with respect to parking. So to the extent that there are limited parking areas, that those parking areas cannot be a extremely long, 200 feet long row of continuous parking, what the city calls a parking facility. Those parking spaces need to be broken up, and they need to be subject to landscaping. And so that's all included in the design guidelines. Certainly we understand that there will be ongoing disagreement about the extent of the buffer, but I did want to make clear what is allowed there and what is not allowed there based in the current iteration of the design guidelines. And finally, with respect to the accessibility of the amenities to existing residents, all of the pocket parks, so those smaller parks facilities, Kurt mentioned they are smaller in nature, they're accessible via the trails. All of those will also be accessible to all the existing residents. So it is not the case that any of the proposed park space will be solely limited and reserved just for the new residents. And this is something that we recognize is important for the community to provide that recreational space. So again, 70% of the property preserved as open space, 6.5 miles of publicly accessible trails, 9 new acres of community parkland, we think creates a good balance, or the right mix. However, the plan can always be improved. And like I said, we really appreciate your detailed feedback. And we look forward to making improvements to the plan as we move through the process. Your comments are valuable, and we will be taking them into consideration.
Thank you, Jonathan. So does we've got there's definitely public some public questions and or statements here that I think probably best addressed to Jonathan. But before I do that, I want to ask if there are subcommittee members who have any feedback on anything Jonathan has presented.
Can you hear me?
Can, yes.
So I sort of disagree with this, what Jonathan's explaining about the percentages, because even on the drawings, it's the 50-foot zone that they're proposing is not even indicated. The whole thing about the 50-foot zone is that it is a solid landscape zone, and it'll have, and a lot of occasions it will have the golf cart trail, which I think is about 8 or 9 feet wide. So then, according to Jonathan, if you've got 33 feet of pure unadult, landscape, but 8 feet of it's going to be trail, now you're down to 23, which is only 8 feet away from 15. So there's still a minimal area. So that's why it's important to the community, 600 residents that are on that open space area, that they have some decent open spaces. And 15, 23 feet, 33 feet is not a good easement. And you're proposing trees that are 50 feet wide on your plant palette, those are going to be overhanging into those homes or those adjacent areas. I mean, you got to spread it out. I mean, that's why you see in Carmel Mountain Ranch right now, that you have ample space where trees can be triangularly spaced and allows decent open planted areas. It's ridiculous to say that 33 feet is adequate. It's not adequate, and it's especially not going to be adequate, for homes being put right up on that edge. Potentially, it could be bigger than 2-story. Which we don't want. But that's the other fight that we're trying to make a point about.
Okay.
I'd like to add a little comment to what Kurt said, if possible. This is Harold.
All right, Harold.
I think Jonathan is not quite accurate on how he's interpreting the rule, the 35% rule that's written in the design guidelines. Let me read it. It says, this is in section 3F, transitions, buffers, edges, and screening. It says circulation elements such as drive aisles, driveways, parking areas, paths, and trails may encroach into the buffer area for a maximum of 35% of the gross buffer lot area of each unit. So to me, that means that if a unit has 5 acres of buffer lot, that's all the AR1 lots, and you want to use, you are able to encroach up to 35% of that as a whole, which means that if you're just trying to narrow it down at one place, like around the edge of a structure, and add the drive aisles and the parking for that, say, 200, 300 unit apartment complex, then you can do that as long as the total of the remaining open space, you can leave the ones where there's no building, you could leave those fully open space because that's not a problem. So I think that to say that you're always going to get 35% of that, that's the maximum at any given point, is misleading. It's a calculation that was deliberately, it's designed to allow some flexibility, which is okay, but the problem is that it also allows for these pinch points where, when convenient, when it's able to be graded out flat, the developers would like to bring the encroachment all the way out to, originally it was all the way out and to 0. The latest release has included the shall be a minimum of 15 feet. So now it's only going to be you will have no more than 35 feet at any given point of the 50 feet being used by encroachments. And I think, Jonathan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you said that there were not going to be any structures in this area. But if I read the AR1 zone description in section 3A of the development standards, which is towards the front of the book, it says, in order to implement the 50-foot buffer at all units where residential development is proposed, AR1 zone 1-1 zone is retained. Other undeveloped areas retain the AR1-1 to protect open space and provide recreational amenities. No inhabitable structures are permitted within this 50-foot zone. So no inhabitable, not no structures, just buildings with people going to live in them. And it says, or no permitted within that zone, with the exception of structures that are accessory to the adjacent residential use, including the following structures: trellises, garden walls not exceeding 6 feet in height, retaining walls, fencing. Okay, and here's where it starts to get into structures. Carports, solar panels. The design guideline says that all the solar panels have to be mounted on carport. They're not allowed to be on the ground or on the roof of the building. So since these are solar, trying to be solar panel, solar supported buildings, I think there's a good chance we should assume that where there's the parking, there's going to be carports over them. And I didn't see anything that couldn't say that there couldn't be a stretch of 5 or 10 cars and with a carport over them, and then another 5 or 10 cars, because this is what's set up at Jefferson. So I think this is what we should be expecting. And it also says beyond the solar panels, we have utility boxes, lighting, signage, and accessory structures such as refuse and recycling storage may encroach into the setback area and AR1 zone. And then here, I think there may be a typo here at this very end. It says, and consistent with the base zone requirements. So I'm thinking they mean as consistent with the base zone requirements there. But either way, there's another place in the document, which I don't have on the tip of my tongue, that mentions about detached garages, that they should match. Oh, it's in the design section, that detached garages should match the design of the buildings, that they should fit in architecturally. Well, that's fine, except that I'm going to bet that those detached garages as non-inhabitable structures could be put in the 50-foot zone or the 35% of that zone. So all in all, I think we should be very cautious about thinking that this 50-foot zone is going to be landscaped unless there's some substantial changes in the guidelines.
I would say it would be only fair to allow Jonathan to respond to that.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you, Harold. I appreciate those comments. So I think, firstly, I don't want to parse what's a structure and not a structure. The city has a kind of Byzantine arcane definition section about what is and is not a structure. But I think when we say structure, we mean it as the lay, just average person would understand it, which is a structure is a place where someone lives. So certainly the California Building Code has a really robust now requirement for solar and other sort of energy saving devices and measures. So could there be in a carport? Yes, there could be in a carport. So I think that the point is that most rear yard setbacks in the neighborhood today are 10 feet. The 50-foot zone is 5 times greater than that. Within the zone, we will have landscaping. It's really intended to function as a trail and landscaping feature, but we'll look at the guidelines and ways to improve that. I don't think we would intend on, and if there's an unintended consequence of the language that allows, detached garages to be placed in any long, succession, that's not our intent. So we'll definitely take a look at the guidelines and make sure that we can make that clearer there. And see if we can improve on that language to make sure that that is clear that the intent of that area is to serve primarily recreational, landscape, and trail uses with some accessory uses allowed as are required by the building code and the California Energy Code.
Thank you. real quick, Jonathan, do parking lots qualify as open space? So, I mean, in other words, any locations labeled as open space on the plans, would those actually wind up being parking lots?
I don't know if the city's calculation, when they're looking at overall open space, if they're including parking areas. Certainly, we're not looking at, when we look at parks and open space areas, we are not looking at a parking lot as being considered as open space.
Okay. All right.
Eric, I have just one real simple question for you, Jonathan. Could there be a situation where there's a 15-foot landscaped buffer?
Well, John, there'll be a minimum 15-foot landscape buffer everywhere. So that condition will occur in all instances.
Could there, okay, so the question then is, could there be a situation where in some location there is a 15-foot and only 15-foot landscape buffer?
I'm not thinking of any particular unit that I can envision now where that condition would occur, but I can't say that I can't say categorically that could never happen. Again, I think we're going to look at the design guidelines and make sure that we reflect the intent of them, which is to make sure that there's adequate screening and that area is primarily reserved for recreational and landscape uses. But I can't say categorically that across the entirety of the 168 acres that there would never be an instance in which there would not be a 15-foot buffer.
Thank you.
Okay. We definitely need to keep moving along. Lots and lots of public comments in the chat here, and I'm going to go actually in a few minutes. I will go all the way back to the beginning because I've been making notes of the times that certain questions were asked. So we will go back to these. But what I'd like to do now is to go back to agenda item 5 as quickly as possible and talk to Michael Prinz. Where did he go? Here he is. There you, Michael?
Yeah, how you doing?
Good, good, thank you, good. So our agenda item 5 is basically subcommittee discussion regarding organization and aggregation of community input to be shared with the city. And I guess what that really boils down to is asking you, because you have experience with this, is what is the best way for the subcommittee and by extension the community council to deliver this type of feedback to the planners working on the project, aside from just having you here in the meeting? How do we best get this in front of the people who are working on this to affect any kind of implementation of it?
Okay, so a little bit to unpack there. Let me try my best to answer it. Good evening, everyone. I'll introduce myself. My name is Michael Prinz. I'm a senior planner with the planning department, and I am the community planner assigned to reviewing the Trails of Carmel Mountain Ranch development project. I apologize for stepping away a little bit earlier. I had to attend to sort of coordination meeting on the community planners committee. So, but to answer your question, Eric, there's a couple ways that you could go about doing this, and one is that the subcommittee could form. You could basically create sort of a letter and then have the community planning group then sort of review that and make any further changes or modifications and send that to the development project manager, Jeff Peterson, and then he could distribute it to all of the staff. I mean, if you wanted to take some sort of action following the meeting tonight and you wanted to get this in front of staff, sooner, you can always send it directly to me and I can distribute it to Jeff and the rest of the review team as well. I mean, ultimately, as you're aware, and most of the community is aware, this project is going to require a community plan amendment and a rezone, which needs city council approval. So it'll still need to go to the planning commission, and it will still need to go to the city council for their review. And so ultimately the planning groups vote on that, and any sort of recommendations or specifications that that are provided in that will be presented to the decision makers for their consideration. So again, kind of a long-winded way of saying it, you really have a number of options at your disposal, and however you want to facilitate it. The only caveat I would add that anything that is meant to represent the full planning group should go before the group itself. So the subcommittee cannot just, based on the council policy requirements, the subcommittee cannot just directly send something to the city and have that sort of under the guise of the full planning group's authority without the group sort of holding a meeting and considering and weighing in on that.
Okay, that's actually, well, in my mind, that's a good answer to the question. So thank you. Because we had a motion on the floor earlier. You may have stepped away for the CPC meeting at that time, and basically it was dealing with what the subcommittee wants to basically recommend to the full planning board as what position to adopt at this point and communicate to the city. So it sounds like potentially us or the subcommittee writing a letter, bringing it to the full board and allowing them to weigh in and potentially edit, and then delivering that to Jeff Peterson or you and others would be the way to do that.
Yeah, and then if there's a sort of a sense of urgency that the group wanted to sort of convey this with the understanding that this is not going to be recorded as a full, as sort of the voice of the full planning group until that, meeting is held. Like I said, you can always transmit that information to me, and I will take it under consideration, similarly. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So are there any other subcommittee comments or questions on this agenda item? I really just kind of wanted to, even for my own understanding, to wrap my head around how we bring this forward to the city. And in my mind, the question is answered, but I want to make sure that any other subcommittee members who want to weigh in on that have a chance to do so.
I had a concern, Eric, in that this project has been going on and being reviewed at the city of San Diego, and have never heard any of our comments or concerns. I mean, a few of us have written letters to the council people and that kind of thing. Those names should go unnamed here, but the community has not gotten involved. There hasn't been a public declaration by the Carmel Mountain Ranch community. And the whole rationale of making a motion by the subcommittee to our planning group was to really just get it going so that, we could do something like write a letter that, say Michael Prince takes that letter and then, and distributes it to the project development manager, however, whatever the best process is. I do think time is of the essence. I do think that's important. That's why I'm making that motion tonight, because we need to get this thing going. We have been falling behind. And with the COVID and everything that's been happening, playing the Brady Bunch here, learning how to play the Brady Bunch, it's slowed things down. It's bogged things down. I don't want to have any excuses. We have to, or hurdles that get in our way to make sure we make our concerns known and heard. We have to do, and this is one way to do it.
Yes. And I clearly understand the intent of your motion, and the full board is going to meet next week. So whatever we decide to do tonight can be quickly brought to them. Obviously we could, we'll discuss it. We'll discuss the actual motion again after we hear the public comment. But at least for my own understanding, I'm a little clearer on how we handle that procedurally. And yes, we have absolutely fallen behind on this, and we're going to rectify that now. And then, as I've suggested to others today, not being constrained by physical space can actually be used to our advantage. We can meet more often if we need to, in order to catch up if we feel like we're behind on some of this. So I think that's important to recognize. And well, I'll leave it at that. So with that, let's move on to agenda item. So just for clarity, we went back to agenda item 5 there for a few minutes. We have completed agenda item 6, and then we're going to move on now to public comment. And so I'm going to go all the way back to 6:02 p.m. here in the chat, because there was a question from Robert Mallory that I don't know was answered, and I want to make sure that that gets answered. And that was about the golf course maintenance building, and the design guideline shows the parcel lot 14 is being zoned private/commercial and residential land use. What do we know about that item? Do you know about anything about that, Kurt?
I don't. We're talking about the maintenance building over on by Walden, right?
Lot 14, yes.
Yeah, there seems to be some vagueness on how that is going to, what is that going to be utilized for? Is it going to be sold separately, or is it going to be part of New Urban West development? Currently not shown.
Jonathan, do you have any input on that one?
Sure. So Unit 14 is not a part of our project. We're not proposing any development in that area. It currently possesses a residential zoning, which is consistent with most of the neighborhood that is RS 114, but we're not proposing anything there, and it's just going to remain as it is in the existing condition.
Is that part of your purchase?
The ownership, the answer is it may be. The owner has the right to retain it. So if they do wish to retain it, they may, and I don't know what their plans are, but we are not planning to do anything there, and there's no development plan there. Any future development that would occur there would have to go through its own separate application process.
Okay, thank you. All right, so bear with me, folks, while I read through comments to make sure I'm not missing questions. And then if you wish to make a public comment at this time, go ahead and signify so by either raising your hand in Zoom virtually, or you can always type it in the chat. In order to raise your hand virtually on Zoom, you go to the participant list all the way at the bottom. On the very right-hand side, there are 3 dots. You can click, and I believe that's where well, that's not where it is on mine now. That's where I've seen it before.
Reactions.
Reactions, thank you. All right, so I'm scrolling through. And if I skip over your comment and you think that I shouldn't have, or you want to ask it again, just type it in the chat again or raise your hand on Zoom. Trails. We talked about that one. Buffer zones. Yes. Okay. The San Diego Planning Commission meeting is on. The playback for the San Diego Planning Commission hearing where this project was initiated was July 25th, 2019, and that can be viewed on the San Diego Planning Commission's website, which just go to sandiego.gov and you'll find your way there. And if you need a more detailed link to the Planning Commission, we can get it for you. I can get it for you. New Urban West, provide comments. Okay. Yeah, formalize the motion by putting it in writing. Thank you, Dawn. That's, I think, what we're talking about doing. Red line. Harold, you say that the red line needs more study and discussion. No one other than us has seen it. Can you clarify what you mean by that?
I was just discussing, early at the very beginning, somebody had asked if there was a copy available.
Oh,
and
I see.
So, it's not, we just saw it on the shared screen, but I think for everybody else, it hasn't been available to look at even.
That's true. And now that it's, yes, and now that it's been shared in a public meeting, I believe we're okay to distribute it. It is a rather large file, but if somebody wants to see Kurt's markup of the design guidelines, I've actually broken that into 2 smaller files that could be emailed. So edelmanrealty@gmail.com, and I'll put that in the chat here in a minute for anybody that wants to email me. And then Mark, I know that Mark Mal gave me a statement that he wants me to read, which I'll do after anybody else has had a chance. Michael Prins, I'm still just, okay, we talked about that. I'm just scanning these to make sure we haven't missed any larger issues. Okay, so we're getting into fresh comment now. Brian, do you want me just to read this, or do you want to make this comment? Brian Hollinsworth.
Yeah, so a lot of the stuff I was just basically adding commentary as we went, right? Because
Okay.
there'll be a chat log of the meeting that goes along with it.
That is true.
Yeah, so I think that we've covered the buffer extensively.
Okay. Andrea Tyndall says, can we address the building height 3 to 4 stories around existing properties? Yes, that's in the markup that we went over tonight. And I assume once we deal with this motion at the end of the meeting, that will be written into the recommendation for the full board to adopt. Legal. Harold, do we need to address your comment regarding legal setbacks here?
No.
Okay.
That was
just for the record.
A little illumination there. Yeah.
Thank you. Eric Spidal has asked, how can environmental impact studies like traffic be performed when normal traffic patterns have not returned to normal due to COVID-19? Shouldn't all studies be put on pause until traffic patterns normalize? Michael, can you answer that?
I don't know the answer to that one. I would have to check with our traffic engineering staff to see how they would evaluate that. So I don't know if Jonathan has sort of worked with his consultants to address that. He may have an answer that I'm not aware of, but it's not something that's within my purview. It's a very long-winded way in saying I don't know.
Thank you.
Yeah, Eric, I think I can briefly speak to that, which is all of the traffic data and the counts that inform all of our studies were taken pre-COVID. So since the governor's order, stay-at-home order, there has been no traffic data collected. All the data that informs the existing levels of service on all the roadways was collected prior to the pandemic.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, Rick Kawa, once we're back to 100%. Okay. Rick Kawa says, Once we're back to 100% traffic, will be unbearable. 1 hour to get from Mira Mesa Boulevard to Rancho Bernardo Boulevard. I assume he means Rancho Bernardo Road. So that's a comment from Rick Kawa, which is in the chat log. Karen, can you please address Eric Spadel's comment? I think, did I do that, Karen? Good, awesome, thank you. Okay, Robert Mallory says, please clarify if the current CMR RCA HOA will manage the new development, or will a new HOA be related? How will this impact our community? Jonathan, can you address that question?
Sure. All the new amenities, while accessible to the existing community, will be maintained by a new HOA. Existing residents will not be assessed any additional HOA dues, nor will the existing Carmel Mountain Ranch HOA be responsible for maintenance of those areas.
Thank you. Okay, I've been looking purely at the chat log here. Let me scroll through the list here to see if we have any raised hands. There was Jerry. Where did he go? Maybe they're not here anymore. There was a comment we couldn't hear because the audio was garbled, but I don't see their hand up now, and so we'll move on. All right. Do we have access? Okay. Okay, one more question here. Do we have access to that traffic data and your materials and methods? We would like to confirm those results independently. I believe, Alan, are you here? Alan Hahn. Yeah, I'm gonna unmute you. Alan, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. You reviewed that traffic study extensively, correct? The one that
No, there was a traffic, it's called a traffic impact analysis. One was submitted to the city on January 29th. I've copied that and circulated it to various people, including yourself.
Yes.
I did not copy all the appendices, which is where the data is. There's since been, I'm sure, a new traffic impact analysis issued by the developer to the city, but the city won't give it to us because the office is closed. And even though it's in digital form, the city says you have to make an appointment to come in to see it first, even though it's digital, but you can't come in because we're closed because of COVID. So Jonathan, you could confirm whether or not there's been another traffic impact analysis since January 29th. And I don't really want to put you on the spot, but I will. Could you provide us a copy? We would normally see it, but the city says we can't see it because we can't physically go to their office.
Thanks, Alan. Yes, there has been an updated traffic report, and we've been working with traffic engineering staff, as with all of the other plans. It's a very similar process that gets reviewed and revised accordingly. A final copy of the transportation impact report and all the associated appendices will be available to all members of the public with the release of the EIR.
But will you give us a copy of the latest one you submitted now at this time? I mean, you submitted one since January 29th, I'm sure, but the city, maybe you have. Have you submitted another traffic impact analysis to the city since January 29th?
Yes, Alan, we have. As I mentioned, we are continuing to work through comments from city staff on that preliminary draft report, and the report will be available, and all the appendices will be available when the EIR is released to the public.
Well, can we see what you've submitted since January 29th? Simple question, yes or no?
Yeah, I don't have anything to add other than all of the reports are preliminary drafts, and they will be released in accordance with the standard city process, which is when the EIR is released to the public.
So the answer is no.
We'll, Alan, we'll see what we can do to get a look at that. Seems we were able to see it before, and now that we have COVID, as you've outlined, doesn't exactly seem fair in terms of us getting a look at that document or those documents. So something for us to work on, obviously. Okay, continuing on with public comments and questions. Karen Vogue is asking, or stating, I guess sort of a statement and a question. There are concerns about liability on the tunnels. Could you consider filling them in permanently and providing a sidewalk go around? That's a question for Jonathan, Karen? Yes.
Hey, Karen, thanks for the question. So the tunnels, we think, and I think they're important to the city staff as well, in creating that kind of network of trail system. So I think the thought is that we want to minimize conflict with cars as much as possible in and around the trail system. So I don't know that filling them in has been considered. And I think that, just as all the trail system, the new master HOA is going to have and will have a plan for addressing maintenance and security.
Thank you. Okay, comment, let's see, from Troy Dom. And Troy says, on some of the holes, well, Troy, why don't I'm going to unmute you. Troy?
Yeah, I'm here.
Why don't you go ahead and, do you want to make your comment, or is I?
Yeah, sure. I mean,
the words are sort of swimming around on the screen for me now.
Yeah, so essentially, in looking at the plan itself, we have a lot of the holes. I mean, topography is important for view corridors. I think we've mentioned that as it relates to Kurt's comment. But I do note, that the plan is not to leave the hillsides flat, but is to build a flat level pad for the many of these apartment buildings. And as an example, I use unit number 6, which the plan is to, according to the grading plan, is to take the hillside, flatten it out, add sort of a platform. So if you're at the bottom of the hill, you're not even level with a 48-foot building, but you're 10 feet underneath the bottom of the building, consequently creating a 58-foot tall buffer, which, Jonathan talks about, giving us a 30-foot, 15-foot, whatever the number is, buffer, but, with a 58-foot structure, that's a real problem. And I think we need to be looking clearly at protecting the view corridors and the topography. And I just use that as one example, but it's in other areas as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, before I forget, Mark, before the meeting started, gave me this statement that he wanted me to read, which I'll go ahead and do. So it's part of the record. Just gotta maximize this here. So this is a public comment from Mark Mal, and he asked me to read it, so I'm going to read it so it's in the record. He says, I've been attending every single meeting. New Urban West made the city believe that CMR community was 100% for rezoning of the CMR golf course property or project, the trails at Carmel Mountain Ranch, and have zero opposition in the community. Yes, believe it or not, that still community members working to stop the project entirely after all this time, simply because any additional housing does not belong in our master plan community that was specifically designed with a golf course open space in mind. That is part of our community plan. Why should we listen about the design guidelines, things like where buildings are proposed and how large buffer areas will be? Okay, so landscaping, where parks and amenities are, etc., or make the project better. New Urban West is using this so-called design guideline to distract the community from reality. The reality is this insane project moving at very high speed through city channels while we all stay at home, while well, because of the stay-at-home order, we're all at home. But the city was still processing the review with no stop. If you don't believe me, please take a look here at the city website. Yes, and then I believe Mark has provided this link in the chat as well. You can see this on the city website. Make sure to click on all the clickable links on the page, the right drop down. Before we all will know, this project will be the City Planning Commission's desk for a vote, and it'll be very soon. Just take a look at my link on cycles 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 has been closed, done, completed. See the date. So 6 cycles from 10 was completed, only 4 cycles left, with cycle 10 almost completed as well. I'm just reading this word for word. My question is, why should we listen to New Urban West, who still not owns the golf course and just craving? Is New Urban West have legal grounds to represent PACS Enterprises LLC, the owner of the property? Is New Urban West have some other power of attorney to represent PACS LLC so they can talk to the community on their behalf? Is the golf course owner responsibility to speak to the neighbors about the sale since he's part of our community plan? As you all can see from my link under customer information, PACS Enterprises LLC is a customer, and on this project also with New Urban West. This project should been stopped a long time ago. Understand me correctly, I'm not against the sale of the golf course property, PACS Enterprises LLC, and they will sell it to anyone they wish the same way they purchased it in 2006. Agricultural zone on the golf course should stay in our community as it is our open space per our community plan, and majority of residents, 5,000 units mainly purchased. I am the original owner in Belle Fleur, and no Presley homes established with the city of San Diego, CMR master plan community, and our community plan in 1984, or Lion Communities. Oh boy, I'm sorry, Mark, I skipped a couple of, I didn't slide over. I think we get the gist, Mark, and I'm definitely going to, I'll just include this entire text in the meeting minutes for the full board, so it's in the record. So I'm sorry that I kind of butchered that a little bit, but your statement will be entered into the record. Okay, so I got to go back here and make sure, because I want to get to the point where we can close out public comment and finish talking about our motion and get on with our evening here. Thank you. Yes, doesn't. Okay, one more question here from Robert Mallory. Doesn't creating a new HOA divide our community? Having 2 HOAs will physically divide from a legal perspective. Please address CMR Maintenance Assessment District. Will new development be included or excluded? It sounds like a question for you, Jonathan. And with this question, I am going to close out public comment. So go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah, I apologize, Eric. I'm not sure I was exactly following the question. I can say that maintenance responsibilities between the 2 HOAs will clearly be delineated in the project plans and approvals, and just to make sure that there's no ambiguity as to who is maintaining what.
Okay. Please address CMR Maintenance Assessment District. Will new development be included or excluded? Do you see that question, Jonathan, in the chat?
Yeah, I do. Right now, we do not believe that any new maintenance responsibility will be added to the existing maintenance assessment district. There is a what they call a MAD, an assessment district that exists for maintaining some landscape areas and parkways. We do not believe we will be adding any new maintenance areas to that assessment district.
Okay. All right, so if there are no strenuous objections, I'm going to close public comment. I don't see any raised hands. I don't see any more questions in the chat. And obviously, we could talk about this stuff all night long if we wanted to. But at this point, we're going to move it along. So back to Kurt. So after all of that, how do you wish to proceed with your motion?
Well, I think I still feel it's legit in terms of getting it out there on the board. I think I'd still like to move that the golf course subcommittee inform New Urban West that we object to the proposal for 1,200 units, and but that the golf course subcommittee could support a proposal for 200 to 250 units, and the topics we have covered tonight in regards to the design guidelines.
So is your motion essentially that we would write a letter essentially to the?
Yes, I think in doing so, we would need to write a letter recommending the board, well, we would recommend that the board write a letter, basically to the planning department, outlining our concerns about the project, and have that delivered to Michael Prince, and have him deliver that to the city's project development manager so that they can share those comments with all the review departments.
So we essentially want to bring this motion to the board next Wednesday.
I mean, if what Mark is saying, you know, in terms of what's been going on, you know, in the background while we're sitting here in our homes on COVID, but the city is running along like nothing's wrong, you know, we're falling behind. And in addition to that, you know, we have another set of, guess what? A new set of guidelines and plans that we all have to look at, or at least make sure that what's been changed. And I think, if I know me, there's more red lines to come.
Okay, so any board members or any committee members with second to that, or questions, clarifications, amendments?
Hi, this is Rich. I'll second that.
Okay, so let's go through the list here. We have a motion and a second. Kurt, I assume you're
Yes.
voting in favor of your motion. John?
I'll vote in favor as well.
Michelle?
I'm a yes.
Okay, I should be reading people's full names here. Kurt Carlson voted yes. John Schroeder voted yes. Michelle Mullen voted yes. Mark Clark?
I'm sorry, could you restate the motion that we're voting on, please?
Yeah,
Clearly.
I can do that. I move that the golf course subcommittee form New Urban West, that it objects to the proposal for 1,200 units, but that the golf course subcommittee could support a proposal for 200 to 250 units, and the topics, and include the topics that we have covered tonight in regards to the red line design guidelines. And I guess that, you know, a part of that, we would be recommending the board, our community group, write a letter to the developer or planning department, I guess the planning department, that would outline our concerns about the project, and submit that to Michael Prince so he could get that to the project development manager at the city.
Thank you. This is Mark Clark. Yes, I'm a yes.
Rich?
Yes.
Craig?
Yes.
Eric Edelman? Oh, that's me. I'm tired here. I'll vote yes. Yeah, yes. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 yeses, and Rick Smith not present. So the motion carries unanimously. And with that, I believe we are out of agenda items. So that means that we're going to adjourn the meeting, and we will have at least one meeting in July. I'm not sure the date. Rick, our regular subcommittee chairman, is not comfortable running a Zoom meeting. So I have to talk to him and figure out if I'm running this for him or just taking over the subcommittee, or exactly what's going on here.
Yeah.
But yes?
On, I think it's July 23rd, that Wednesday, The project Aliante goes before the planning commission.
Yeah, so we won't do anything on Wednesday the 23rd. The regular golf course subcommittee meeting is the fourth Tuesday, or at least it was in the before times. So that would be a logical place to have it, although that is also, I believe, the same night as the CPC meeting, which I'm supposed to attend. But we can work all that out. At this point, let's say the next golf course subcommittee meeting is TBD, definitely at least one, if not more, in July. And then we will have the regular planning board meeting Wednesday of next week, and then figure out when the next golf course subcommittee meeting will be after that. So if that's okay with everyone, we'll go ahead and adjourn for tonight. Give me a thumbs up if we're ready to adjourn. All right. So I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. That was 5:30, 7:30, 2.5 hours. Good work. Thank you for bearing with us and staying with us. Thank you to Michael Prinz for being here for the city. And thank you to Harold Klotz for providing his analysis and input. Thank you to Jonathan Frankel for being here. And anybody else Troy is here, thank you. And anybody I forgot is just merely an oversight. Alan, thank you. So with that, I'm going to say good night, meeting adjourned, and we'll see you next time.
Happy Independence Day, everyone.
That's right. Happy 4th.
Happy 4th.
I got to remember to go turn on my red, white, and blue lights now.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you, guys.